It's been a few weeks since we set up this hardwood propagation bed with bottom heat, and so in this video I'd like to do an update and show how things are going along, so stick around. I'm not going to explain how I made this in this video. If you're interested in that, you can link back to the first video where I show the whole layout in here. But basically this is roughly 3 feet by 8 feet propagation space that can allow us to get rooting on many thousands of cuttings before the growing season takes on. And we started putting cuttings in here February 22nd, and it's March 11th now, so however many days that is. And we've been adding ever since. And a couple things I want to make a note of. First of all, something you may see with this or have a question about is how come everything's so darn dense? So in the past I used to put each cutting in a row with space in between them, and then I realized the only point of having them in here is to get them to start rooting, to start callousing, not to actually grow for the season. So keeping them in groups like this, so in other words, there's like 70 or 80 hardy kiwi cuttings right in this one area. They're not going to have huge roots in this space. They're just going to get started. And so this makes it so we can do thousands and thousands of cuttings at the same time in here. One other thing that might be of interest to folks, we are not using rooting hormone at all. What we do is we'll make a slightly dilute raw honey tea. So it's warm water with, I don't know, maybe a tablespoon of honey in there, stirred in. And as we're processing cuttings, we'll dip them in there. And that hydrates them. It gives them a little bit of fuel, a little bit of antibacterial, antifungal, and some amino acids. And it feels a lot nicer than using chemicals. Now these cuttings, shout out to our friend Justin P. down in New Jersey. These are your cuttings here. A thorny blackberry that a friend of ours sent from New Jersey, and also thank you for the hot sauce, that's wonderful. And so these were cut, he sent them along, and so rather than putting them in a row, you know, each one spaced out, I'm just simply moving aside this mix of perlite and sand and sticking them right in there, banking the material back up. And my goal is to set the bottoms of their roots, or the bottoms of their cuttings, roughly where our heat cord is, which is about 4 inches down. Let's take a look at some of these cuttings. Again, the goal with a system like this, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. It's not about growing the plants out, so we don't want huge leafy greens on top. The mantra is you want it to root before it shoots, and when it's cool up above and warm down below, those are the criteria that happens. And so, for example, if I take a look at, I see female hardy kiwi here. These were taken February 24th. I'm just going to pull a few random ones out so we can see what's going on. Now, I have no idea exactly what we'll get, but here's some interesting things happening. I'll put my hand behind so you can see a little bit. This one, you can see, is doing what I would hope it would do. That's called callousing, where there's a nice whirl of tissue. It's like stem cell tissue that's going to start forming roots pretty soon. And so this one's pretty promising. It's ready, just about to go out there. Here's one that's not, it has a little bit of callousing, but not much. It'll definitely need a little more time. Another one with just the tiniest fleck of callousing, and then one that's barely doing any. That's kind of a neat thing that those 4 show the different stages. These were all stuck on the same day. This one's just further along. Why? I couldn't quite tell you. Maybe it's just a healthier piece of wood. Maybe it was closer to a heat cable. Lots and lots of variables. But I'll put them back in. And that pattern plays out over and over again. So for example, here are some blackcap raspberries. This is a variety we call peach cap that make a beautiful peach-colored fruit. And you can see this one has got a nice example, some really good callousing happening at the bottom. And so that's well on its way to being a nicely rooted plant soon enough. And what we're going to want is to hopefully get the timing right, that this callousing really is swollen, maybe the tiniest bit of roots are just beginning to form. And that's when we'll take these out of this bed and actually transplant them with some space, let's say 4 inches, 3 inches or so in the garden, to have them then actually root and then shoot and grow for the season. This area might be interesting for some folks as well. We'll have to move these soon enough. As soon as we run out of open space in the rest of the bed, these will have to move. But right now what we're doing, so here you can see this is sea kale, rootlets. These were collected on January 23rd of this year. And what I did is I went out when there was a thaw and I collected a mountain of these little rootlets. Now this, if you ever order sea kale rootlets from us, this is what they'll look like. And you can see, kale, they're starting to differentiate a little bit because of the bottom heat. They don't critically need that, but it's definitely helpful. You can see this is starting to swell. That's actually the top of one. And let me get these back in. Since I lost the orientation, I'll just lay them on their side. Here you can see some that are much further along. So there's one that's a nice fat root cutting. You can see the roots starting to form at the bottom and the top growing here. And there's just enough ambient light coming in that their needs are being met. But probably in the next week or two, we'll need to either move these out to a high tunnel or ideally out to the garden with a little protection. Horseradish, this one's pretty fun. A friend of ours, Tilda, thank you so much for all these horseradish if you're watching. We took the roots and chopped them up. We were storing them in our root cellar and they started to mold and dry out. So we just planted them all in garden soil. And they were down in the root cellar for a while, but since we had the space here, we brought them up. Look at these crazy beasts. You can see our root is just shooting like crazy. So this will get planted out in the garden. So really amazing. Horseradish, comfrey, a whole bunch of plants like that will root from their roots or shoot from their roots. And even these will differentiate and turn into their own plants. So we could even cut these up if we wanted to. Pretty amazing. Plants just want to replicate. Important note, just like I said in the first one, or I want to say with each time I do a video about these propagation systems, I'm not suggesting to folks that if you are just getting into propagating, oh, you should spend $100 or $200 and build a bed like this. By no means. But if you're starting to get into it and you think about it, a small heat mat, small containers, and seeing this example where they can be clustered so tightly together, very conservatively, you could imagine a container this size on a heat mat in a garage for $50 worth of parts. You could probably do about 300 cuttings at a time. And people keep asking about watering these, so let me just show you. I don't water this very often. I don't want to see water running through it, and I'll feel it periodically. I want it moist enough that there's no dust or anything, but I'm not going for super, super wet. But I'll periodically come through and just give everybody a little bit of water to make sure things don't dry out. But I don't want to see deep saturation. I don't water it every day. It's probably every, I would say, 3 or 4 days. But since the garage is cool, it doesn't need huge amounts. And so we've got some room to add some more cuttings in here. We'll take some more sea berries, some grapes, all sorts of different varieties. And when we're ready to transplant these out into the garden, I'll do one more update video showing success rates with this treatment. No hormones or rooting hormones, no artificial coloring or any of that kind of stuff, just warmth and a nice lean media for these plants to root in. And hopefully we'll get 3,000 or 4,000 plants out of this. Thanks for watching.